My name is Feras Mousilli. I'm the chair of the board of directors for the Arab Film and Media Institute. We are pleased to have you join us for our first in our filmmaking webinar series. This is an exciting event, and we've got a very distinguished panel that we're going to be presenting here. So very quickly, we've got Rami Alayan on with us from San Francisco, as well as Yasmeen Turayhi. Both of them filmmakers, very accomplished. I'm a huge fan of Rami's films. They've been featured in festivals around the world. The reports on Sarah and Salim, one of my personal favorites. And we're gonna have him and Yasmeen, the director of A Star in the Desert, who's also been winning awards for child actors, etc. So congratulations, Yasmeen, on that work. But before we dive into the actual panel, I felt that it was appropriate to give a little bit of a background on the Arab Film and Media Institute, and basically the key tenets related to our organization. So this will be a quick little introduction to our pillars before we move into the panel. So the Arab Film and Media Institute's essential purpose was around the Arab Film and Media Festival. So we've had the Arab Film Festival in place for over 25 years, and it was established in San Francisco to present the best in contemporary Arab films, to reflect the richness of the culture and provide an opportunity for Arab filmmakers to be able to capture the lens and really depict the Arab world and the culture in all of its complexity. While the Film Institute had originally started as a film festival, we saw that the mission was quite broader than that. And a few years ago, we ended up completing our transformation into the Film and Media Institute. And while the Arab Film Festival that's held every year is still our cornerstone event, we have events throughout the year and screenings that we'll end up discussing, as well as some of the other pieces of our institute that we'll end up discussing here. We were launched in 1996 in San Francisco, and it's been the largest independent film festival outside of the Arab world that focuses on Arab film. 2019 was a banner year for the festival and for our institute. We ended up showcasing over 56 films from 32 countries around the Arab world. And what was also absolutely amazing, we had over 31 women directors that were represented. So absolutely banner year to be able to spread, the message of the beauty of Arab film to tens of thousands of people. Opening night has been an absolute phenomenal event within the San Francisco film community. Our attendance is always full capacity, and we've seen ourselves grow year over year in terms of the actual audience attendance and the outreach in terms of the media folks' coverage of the festival and the quality of the films that we've been able to premiere. Now, as you can see, the film festival is only one pillar of the Arab Film and Media Institute's mission. We've got three others that we just wanted to highlight quickly today. So AFMI education ends up focusing on high school and university programs to educate students on Arab film. We've partnered with high schools throughout the Bay Area and the US to be able to provide materials for students and teachers to be able to better understand the Arab culture. AFMI industry events we'll end up speaking about here shortly, but we've been in collaboration with industry partners, specifically on our ability to promote Arab film and our work with the Film Academy here. And obviously, AFMI creators is that final pillar, and you'll end up seeing some of the initiatives that we have to encourage filmmakers around the world, as well as the various aspects of getting involved in film and promotion. So with that, our Takallam program within the education pillar has allowed filmmaking within the Arab teen community. And this has been an exciting initiative that we've seen high schoolers and other folks get involved hands-on in their ability to make films, to start with the screenwriting process, and really develop, right, their ability to be behind the camera and to get an idea of a lens. And it's been an incredible success. We've had industry sponsors come in really wanting to help educate youth in that front. In terms of our industry focus, we've partnered with the Academy for the Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles, as well as new filmmakers in LA. This has been a tremendous outreach and adds a lot of the credibility for the Arab Film and Media Institute. And you can end up seeing our screenings at the Academy are always packed and end up attracting a far greater audience than simply Arab film aficionados. The partnership with new filmmakers also ends up bringing a number of other cultural events and perspectives. Finally, back to our seminal event here today related to AFMI creators. These partnerships have really helped us ensure that folks just like yourselves that are interested in film have the opportunity to learn more from filmmakers themselves about the various creative processes that are involved. So with that, I want to end up turning to just our one last comment about our programming. Again, given the fact that we have transitioned from a film festival into a media institute, we've expanded considerably, and our programming comes throughout the year. And you'll see that we actually have an Arab Love series that's focused on LGBTQ, Arab community stories, and the challenges that they're facing. One of our key tenets for the AFMI is to challenge prejudice and stereotypes. And anytime that we can end up providing a different perspective, ensuring that the Arab world is just as rich and complex as any other culture. And the idea that we're some kind of monolithic body that all operates in a single fashion or with, you know, a single stereotype is far, far from the truth. So with that, we've had an Arab film series online that you can end up participating in with feedback from directors. We've also ended up bringing you today this Arab Filmmakers 101, which is, again, an inaugural event. And we're proud to bring both Rami and Yasmeen on to present their perspectives on film. We're going to end up starting off with Rami. As I had stated, Rami is an incredibly productive filmmaker, given the fact that he's actually doing this in addition to, you know, being an engineer in Silicon Valley, and, you know, the fact that he's made a career of this has been absolutely fantastic and inspirational to a lot of the folks in the community that have these creative aspirations. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and hand the floor and mic to Rami to start his portion of the presentation.
Hey, thank you so much, Feras. I'm just gonna interrupt you for a second because Yasmeen is going first.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay.
We had that update. Yes. So Yasmeen, we'll give you the floor here so you can end up sharing your screen there.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Feras. And can everyone hear me? Maybe I can just get like a thumbs up because I know everyone's muted. Okay, great. Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you guys about filmmaking 101 and what it takes to really make a short film. So a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm pretty new to the film space. I'm a writer, executive producer, and producer for a short film called A Star in the Desert. It's like a fantastical narrative drama, and it follows a young boy on the eve of the first Gulf War in Baghdad. We just found out that we won an audience award for Best Child Actor at the Beirut International Children and Family Film Festival. And we're also going to be presenting at a lot of other festivals in the coming months. It's been obviously a very insane year with film festivals canceling because of the pandemic. So more to come. And some other projects that I'm working on, I've been nominated for the second round of the Sundance Writing Lab for a feature that I wrote called the El Mansour Social Club. I'm working on a short called The Day Everything Changed with a team in Los Angeles. And I also finished 2 new scripts during quarantine, 1 feature and 1 short, trying to make use of my time indoors. So I think, you know, whenever you tell someone that you've made a movie or you've written a script that's gone into production, usually, I'd say half the time, this question usually emerges when people say, I have a really great idea for a movie, what should I do next? And so everyone sort of believes that they have this amazing story that's going to win awards and win Oscars. And so it's a very interesting question to always get as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker. So I wanted to just set the stage and say that an idea is not a screenplay, a synopsis is also not a screenplay, and an outline is not a screenplay, but it's getting closer. There's really no easy shortcut to writing a screenplay. Screenplays just require a lot of work. And for those of you who don't know, 1 minute in a movie is equal to 1 page of a screenplay. So let's say you have a feature that's 90 minutes long, that would require you to write 90 pages for a screenplay. So it does take a tremendous amount of investment. And some people I know who are actually just professional filmmakers, as Feras mentioned, I actually have a career in tech, so I'm doing this part-time. For people that are professional, it even takes them several weeks to several months, and definitely several months of revisions and editing. Most people go through, I would say, anywhere from 40 to 100 plus revisions of a script. It was really incredible also for a short film. We went through about 40 different revisions. And a lot of it has to do with your budget, what you can actually create. And so I'll give you an example. In my film, it's a fantastical drama, we had a flying fish scene, and my team decided that it was way too much of an investment to create a pool with a flying fish, so we decided to skip it. So things like that are really important to creating a movie, and really being honest about what you can do with the budget that you have. And even if you have an amazing screenplay, implementation is everything, right? Operationalizing your idea really is everything. So there's been so many scripts that have been written that have actually never made it into production. And a lot of people who've written scripts and actually sold them to production companies oftentimes never get made. So making and finishing a movie is actually really, really important, right? And it takes a lot of effort, which Rami will actually go into. I try my best to speak over the doors going in, so I'll maybe just speak louder. I'll use my Arab voice. So where to start? So for you guys who are maybe curious about where to start, I would say read screenplays. There's many different sites that will allow you to purchase screenplays or read screenplays for free. You want to get an understanding of how screenplays are written. They're very different than anything else, than plays, than obviously books, fiction books. So I actually write fiction as well as write screenplays, and I always have to context switch whenever I'm writing a screenplay, because you're showing people what's happening on the screen. You're not telling them. So for example, a woman is upset with her mother. You wouldn't say Sarah is upset with her mother. You would show Sarah ignoring her mother when she's asking her questions about her life, as an example. So it's a really unique craft, and it requires you to use a different muscle when creating a frame and a scene. Again, watch movies of the screenplays you've read. I actually watched 150 movies in a couple of years because I really wanted to understand what was in a director's head. So I would stop each minute by minute of the movies that I watched and write down what was going on in a frame. And people really hated watching movies with me because I would stop it 100 times. But that's really, really important if you are taking this seriously. Take a screenwriting class. There's a number of different screenwriting classes that you can take to develop your outline or concept. There's a lot in San Francisco. You can honestly just Google it, but I'll give you some places where you can find some screenwriting classes online.
And
Again,
yes,
if you
can actually reference a screenwriting class that you've taken, that I think would also be helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually referenced this in a later slide, but I took script anatomy, and I actually took a lot of different film classes. So I took a class at the New School many, many years ago when I lived in New York. I took classes at the UCLA Film Extension School. Pilar Alessandra is a great person who has online classes. Script anatomy is great, but it's geared more for TV writing, but it's still, you know, it's always great to take different types of TV and script writing classes because everyone's got kind of a slightly different philosophy. And one thing to really educate yourself on is Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. So one of the first things I learned when writing scripts is, especially for a feature, and you could apply this to a short as well, is that the first 25% of a film is act 1, 50% of the next 50% is act 2, and the last 25% is act 3. And I'd say about 95 to 98% of films made today follow this hero's journey, Joseph Campbell formula. I mean, it's really incredible. One of my professors actually asked our class to come bring in films that did not follow this formula. You know, protagonist overcomes a conflict, has a mentor that guides them through the conflict. There's an antagonist that prevents them sometimes from reaching their goal. And then at the end of the movie, they overcome it. That's like a standard arc, a hero's arc, a journey that most characters go on for film. So just something to think about when you're thinking about writing a story and developing your characters. And also character development is incredibly important. I can't stress that enough. When I'm developing my characters, I spend a lot of time thinking about people that I know, about a character that has complexities, right? You don't want a person who is angry and mean only, right? There's a person that most of us have contradictions and dualities. And so, you know, watch people, see how they interact, see how they think about things. I think that this is a key that I think most people, at least for me, I wish early on I spent more time thinking about. So now I really dive deep and develop my characters and put a lot of different details about what type of life they lived, what were their challenges growing up, what's their internal goal, what's their external goal. So things to think about. So screenplays go through many revisions, sometimes hundreds. And again, your first attempt is not going to be close to the final. So get as much as you can on paper, but know that it's going to change. And you're going to, you know, obviously go through notes and feedback from people. Feedback is brutal as a film writer. I always cringe whenever I get people's notes. But, you know, at the end of the day, it makes the film better. And then you also have an internal compass on integrity for the film that you're making. So here are some of the programs and courses that I recommend: the New School, NYU Film, UCLA Film Extension, Script Anatomy, and Pilar Alessandra. Check them out, they're great. But again, I think the first thing you should do is read a script and see how different it is. These are some screenwriting softwares that I use. So I actually started out writing scripts. This is gonna like age me right now, but I started writing scripts on Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Actually, Microsoft Word back in the day is what I had. And, you know, the Final Draft is probably one of the most popular screenwriting software programs. Writer's Duet is what I personally use. And while they make the screenwriting process a lot easier, you still have to know what you're doing, right? You know, you can select which prompts you need, but you have to know what you're selecting. So it does require an investment of education. These are some of the books that I've enjoyed that really helped me kind of break into this field. The Big Picture, I'll actually start from the bottom up. The Big Picture is one we read at the UCLA Film School, and that is really important to understanding the operational aspect of film and how films are made in Hollywood, just so you can get an understanding of what the journey takes. Making Movies is about completing movies. I thought that was fantastic. Breaking In, Lee Jessup is just great. She's a consultant. I've actually synced up with her a few times. She has a book called Breaking In. Save the Cat is like kind of like the best known screenwriting book. I didn't think it was amazing, but I think it's standard, so you should read it. Rebel Without a Crew, it's about a guy who is an independent filmmaker, and you know, it's a really interesting story. It's kind of his diary towards making his first film feature. So all interesting. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey of making A Star in the Desert. So this is me. My hair's in a bun. I barely blow dried it for many, I would say days, not weeks, days. And so my hair is in a bird's nest, and this is my executive producer, and became one of my dear friends, Ode Aladella, who has as much credit, if not more than I do, when making this movie. So we came together. I actually sent him the script, and he said to me, over dinner, he said, I'm going to help you make this movie. It really touched me, and I want to work on this with you together, with you. And both of us had never actually made a film. We just knew we had a dream that we wanted to make it. So it's, there's a process, right? You have to obviously get financing. Nobody will talk to you unless you have money. And they don't actually consider personal funds that interesting, because eventually you'll run out of your personal funds. So people want to know that other people are supporting your dream. Pre-production takes a good chunk of time. We spent about 3 or 4 months in pre-production, hiring the actors, training the actors, getting set up in Los Angeles, doing the production design. So the actual art of filming on set is actually the least amount of time you'll spend. So we spent only 7 days filming, but we spent about 4 months prepping for that, and then a year in post-production doing the editing. So a lot of the magic happens in the editing room. And then distribution, I'm not going to talk about because we're not actually really there yet. We just have gotten into our first film festival, and Rami's going to talk about that. He has much more experience with a lot of different feature films and distribution. So stay tuned for that conversation. So this is kind of like the timeline. Most short films take about a year or 2 to complete, depending on obviously how complex it is. I didn't realize it at the time, but my short film was super complicated. It was very capital intensive, fantastical drama, animation, kid actors, all of those things. And like also the locations that we use are like the perfect storm for like how to make a complex and very expensive movie. So don't do that. If you want to make a movie, I suggest you write more of a talking heads film. This is kind of our process. The Kickstarter was brutal. I had never raised money that way before, and it's actually still public. I think it'll be public for the rest of my life, so you can laugh at me if you want to check it out. But we got 120% funded. I was literally calling people that I hadn't talked to in the 7th grade, saying, hey, remember that time I helped you on your homework? Pay up, So, you get a little creative in this process. It was something that as an Arab woman, I had never really been taught how to do, was to ask people for money. And a lot of people actually said, yeah, send us your term sheet. But as a short filmmaker, you're not going to really make a return on your investment. I mean, maybe you'll break even at best. So it was primarily donations. And we ended up getting 4 checks written by incredible people actually in Silicon Valley. So it was brutal, though. I will say that was the hardest part.
Yes, I mean, on the Silicon Valley approach, the kind of fundraising with the Kickstarter, what do you think, how much time should you allocate to that Kickstarter campaign versus other traditional, fundraising methods? And I just want to caveat this with one other point for the general audience as well. We are taking questions. Make sure that you submit your question online through the console, and we'll be able to address those towards the end.
Yeah, that's a great question for us. So for the Kickstarter, it took about, I would say, maybe 6 weeks of prep to actually figure out the story that we wanted to tell. We had a video that we used. Kickstarter is actually not a great platform to raise money for film. It's primarily a platform that you raise money for products, which we didn't know about. I mean, neither of us had done anything like this before. And so we actually got a lot of funding through making phone calls and then emails. So I'm a marketer. I'm a product marketer in tech. So Ode and I actually ran MailChimp campaigns. We, imported email addresses. We were doing marketing campaigns every single day. I will say it was incredibly stressful. So if you can hire a marketing team, I mean, working full time and then doing a Kickstarter full time was really difficult. But it probably took 6 weeks of prep, and then we had a 6-week campaign. I think it was 45 days or so. I can't remember now, but I think it was 45 days. We wanted to give people enough time. And I think we strategically decided to run it during our birthdays. So everyone was like, happy birthday, Yasmeen. And Ode's birthday was also same week. So people would hear about our Kickstarter through our birthday. I mean, we got a little crafty. So we did raise the money. A lot of it came in the last couple of days, but it was brutal. And then we ended up getting 4 checks, which were way higher than the Kickstarter amount. But that required, a lot of conversations and it's just a different art, raising money different ways. And I think we only got a lot of our checks after we started filming. So people didn't really think we were serious until we were like, oh, actually we're filming and now we're going into post-production and now we need more money. So that was once you have something you can show people, everything becomes so much easier. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing.
That's definitely critical with every Kickstarter. The more that you can actually show a product, people are more likely to end up funding. So absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of products that we didn't have to share, we called everyone for help. So this is my mom. My mom's an artist, part-time. So I had her paint me something that I could use in the Kickstarter to show people the fantastical scene of these horses in the desert before it happened. And actually she created these 7 or 8 paintings that are amazing. They ended up being some of her best work, in my opinion. Actually, no, she's an amazing artist, but still, it was just, she would paint them in one day. And we used them in postcards. We used them to promote the film through email. So we literally called everyone in our family for help, including my dad. So my dad, didn't really understand what I was doing. He wanted to be in the movie. The director and I, Zach, joked about having him in the film. So this is him, getting in some costumes and showing us his versatile ability to be in whatever costume. So it was very funny. We actually had a part for him and had to cut it out. And he was so disappointed because he spent 4 months growing his beard. He's a physician in real life. And so he said, I don't think I can continue keeping this beard. And we told him, we'll find a spot for you. So we actually found a spot for him in the film, which is like maybe less than 10 seconds. And he was super happy. And I think also, I don't know if the rest of you can relate, but having Arab parents who maybe don't necessarily appreciate their kids pursuing these types of the arts in general versus maybe something more technical. I won a ton of respect when my dad saw how much pain and suffering and operational finesse you needed to have in order to make a movie. So, and I think he's on the call right now. So, so about production design. So this is, we got extremely lucky, although I asked every single Iraqi that my mom knew in California if they had the right wardrobe that we could basically use to replicate what it was like to be in Baghdad in Iraq. So this is Zach and I, we spent 6 hours with this lovely woman who we finally found after many, many phone calls. We just showed up at her house and we went through all of her stuff and we packed about 6 or 7 boxes and she was very generous. She let us, have it, thank goodness. But it really helped bring the story to life. So Sarah ends up wearing, our main actress ends up wearing that middle wardrobe. So again, also, and Rami's gonna speak to this, having some star actors in your film goes a long way. So Jamal was actually his first film, which I'm so proud of him because he won Best Child Actor. But we had Sarah Abi Kanan, who's a famous actress in Lebanon. She's on a lot of different soap operas in Lebanon, is in a lot of movies. She's phenomenal in the movie. I mean, everyone always talks about her acting. And then Khalid Abul Naga, he's a 7-time award-winning Egyptian actor. I'm sure you guys in the Arab world know of him. So they read the script, they loved the script, and they wanted to be a part of the film. Odeya obviously also established great connections with them. We found Jamal through this amazing Arab casting agent. So if you guys ever do shoot a film, you can contact me and I'll give you his name. He's amazing. So this is just an example of how much work it takes to make a movie. This is us having dinner at 2 a.m. I'm not exaggerating, in Los Angeles. Can you guys hear me, by the way? I don't know if my internet went off a little bit. Yeah, okay, good.
You're good.
Okay, great. So this is us filming and then a 2 a.m. dinner. We expect to work 20-hour days when you're actually filming. Like there's basically no time to sleep. And some days we felt like Ari Gold. I can tell you so many insane stories about how we kept running out of money. We actually ran out of money on day 6 of filming and we had to leave Los Angeles. And I was like, distraught, sitting in the LAX airport. But, you become creative with asking people for funds. And so we ended up going back and finding an amazing location to continue. We also learned a lot in this process. We really grew. I think in terms of self-growth, everyone should make a movie in their lifetime and learn a lot about yourself. And then this is just, I wanted to give you guys some example of the locations that we used for the film. So we wanted to find a space that looked like the Arabian Desert, because there's a scene where there's a scene in the Arabian Desert. And so Pismo Beach Sand Dunes replicates, it's kind of like a replica of the Arabian Desert. Everyone always asks if it was shot in the Middle East, and it's not. It's shot in California. We also use a studio in Los Angeles, and we built the set from scratch. So we're very grateful to those guys. They were really helpful. And then the last the last place was Blue Cloud Ranch, and the Hurt Locker is actually shot there. So it took a lot of conversations to be able to get that space for a very discounted rate. So we're super excited. And then obviously this is the fantastical creature that one of our AFX directors made. So that's us filming. And, just to kind of wrap this up, I want to say, if you think about things like Star Wars, The Wizard of Oz, E.T., it conjures like some symbols in your mind, right? Like it stays with you. You watch The Wizard of Oz, every one of us who's watched The Wizard of Oz remembers aspects of that movie and how it shaped us and how it maybe transformed the way we saw the world. And so I think, as a filmmaker, as a writer, as a creator, I think there's a great responsibility when it comes to telling stories. And I felt, when I was growing up, I was 7 when the first Gulf War happened. And I felt that an Iraqi was either at worst a victim and at worst an antagonist or the enemy, and at best a victim, but they were never the hero. They were never the protagonist in the story. And so, as Arabs and as people from the Middle East, I think we are, we really don't have a lot of presence in Western media. And as a result, I think that's really shaped people's perspective of us, right? So, if you remain silent, someone else is going to tell your story. And that's really what happened. I saw a lot of different perspectives of the first Gulf War, and I never saw the perspective of a family and a child on the eve of the first Gulf War. And I really passionately wanted to tell our side of the story. So, my call to action is support the arts, support creators, especially people whose stories you may have never heard of. I think everyone has a story to tell. And also making a movie is really a marathon, not a sprint. So it is not something that will happen overnight. I think, if you really want to commit yourself to this, you can do it part-time, but just know that it's going to require, a lot of your emotional bandwidth. And lastly, just questions for you to ruminate about before I pass it over to Rami Musa. Which movies inspire you? Think about the movies that have really shaped the way that you saw the world. Which stories changed the way that you saw yourself, and which directors do you admire? So hopefully that was helpful. And yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Yes, Yasmeen. I really appreciate that. And especially considering the fact that that's exactly the AFMI mission, right? To be able to enable folks to want to create, to provide the resources and information so creators can get engaged, grab the camera, and instead of just being the focus of the lens, Jack Shaheen's, TV Arab really made that point very, very well driven about the fact that Arabs have usually been depicted as villains. So you grabbing that camera, going through the Iraq War as a child, absolutely seminal event as well. And glad to see that it inspired some creativity. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn to our next presenter, Rami, to give his perspective. Again, a reminder that this is being recorded, and any questions that you have, if you submit them through the chat, we'll be selecting a few towards the end of this conversation, and then trying to address those as well. So Rami, you've got the floor.
Thanks, Feras, and thanks, Yasmeen, for a great presentation. I feel your pain every time I see these slides, and I remember all the pain that we go through when we make films. But it's really rewarding in the end when you're done with it and you have a finished product. You feel like all the pain over months and years was worth it. So let me share my screen here. And we'll shift focus here a little bit to what happens after you make your short or a number of shorts. So I'm going to focus a little bit about that, kind of what things to consider when you're making your first indie feature. So let's just make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So let me just give you a little bit of quick intro to who I am. Rami Alayan. I work with my brother Muayyad. Muayyad is based in Palestine. I'm based here in the Bay Area in Oakland. And we've been working together for pretty much 15 years now, making films together. Muayyad does it full time. I do it on the side. I have a full-time job here in tech, and I'm a screenwriter, producer, director, designer, everything on the side. So we have made a number of shorts on documentaries before we started making feature films. Our first feature film was Love, Theft, and Other Entanglements. It was something that we really financed with a micro budget, out of pocket largely, and an Indiegogo campaign to finance the post-production. We were very happy that it premiered in the Panorama section of the Berlin Film Festival 2015, which allowed it to see a lot of festival and distribution success from there on. It also won the Best Film Award at the Arab Film Festival that year.
That's right.
I am so sorry to interrupt you, Rami, but I'm hearing that people cannot see the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, can you check?
Present, Rami? Because I can definitely see the slides. I just don't think that they're actually in presentation form.
Okay, how about now? I just exited the presentation form.
No, maybe stop the sharing and try again.
Okay.
And thank you everyone to hang out with us here with, some technical. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm not gonna restart, but I'll just say, this is me, this is my brother. We've been working together. Hopefully you've heard the audio. So this was the first film we made. It was a micro budget, really small budget that we financed out of pocket with an Indiegogo campaign to finish the post-production. And then we made a second film. The successes of the first film helped us finance, and the second film, it wasn't an easy game by any means, but we were able to get a little bit more financing upfront before we start. It's still definitely in the low budget category when you consider the films out there. This film premiered in competition at the Rotterdam Film Festival 2018 with won a couple of awards. From there on, it got a really huge distribution worldwide, probably about 50 countries. In the US, it was in the theaters, it's on Amazon, it's in Movie, it's on
Rami, can you actually call out budgets? Because, for the folks that are on here, it's good just to have some perspective as well.
So I would say, when you talk about budgets, there are many things to consider. There's actually how much money you had to make the film, but you also have to put value on the things you got for free, because that kind of gives you a sense of, what value, what kind of went into the making of the film. So the very first film, the Love, Theft, and Other Entanglements, I would say the total value was about $100,000. We actually probably had about half of that in cash. And the rest was like in-kind contributions, getting family to pose as extras. My mom was doing the catering, essentially. And I was, art director, co-writer, co-producer, and I was extras as well, and everything in between, and a driver. So it was a really micro budget, super indie style film. It was exhausting, beyond what a normal film production is exhausting. But that's kind of how we did it, because we simply, in Palestine, there is no financing for film. And this was our feature film, which is even that much harder to finance. So we decided to go down this route. By all means, this is not the route that everybody takes, but it's one option of trying to do our first film as much as possible out of pocket. And then we really did the Indiegogo for post-production. And really what helped us, get through the Indiegogo fight in the end was the fact that we heard the news from Berlin. The fact that Berlin selected the film based on a rough cut helped us actually push through the Indiegogo and get the rest of the money we needed for post-production. So it was really cutting it close. So it was a whole other different kind of approach. The second film, I would say, the total budget was around 650. I would say actual cash was probably less than that. I don't remember exactly, but definitely less than that. Because here, again, even though we had some financing, but still there were a lot of things that were needed because it was a different kind of film, different kind of size of film, size of crew, size of cast, and different equipment was needed. So not everything we could get money for, so we relied a lot on in-kind contributions. We have Mexican co-producers who provided the camera equipment. That alone is $50,000 worth of equipment that we did not have money to just rent. So luckily we were able to find partners in Mexico who were willing to give us the camera and that be their share in the film, essentially by letting us use their camera for free. So we had to do things like that. So let's kind of recap a little bit and kind of look at a roadmap. When you're building your film career, you really start with making a short film or possibly many short films. And this is really part of the learning process. This is where you try out things, you learn from the challenges. That's when you should make mistakes, because this is where you would want to make the mistakes as opposed to when you start making feature films. And it's also the place where you start experimenting with the style that you want to go for and also start getting some initial exposure to the industry. Then you move on to making a low budget first feature. And that basically would give you more track record, more exposure to the industry. And with that also, you build some partnerships that will help you grow your network to make an increasingly more complex film as you go forward. So that's really important to keep in mind, that every film you make is a stepping stone towards a larger project, a more complex project. So it's always good to be aware of what your project does to for your career and for your next film. And one thing to keep in mind, and this was brought up and alluded to in one of the questions in the chat earlier, that film at the end of the day is an art as well as an industry. So there's a business of film here. A film is an art piece, but a film is a product. Somebody has to go pay to see the film or rent it on Amazon or watch it on Netflix. Somebody's paying Netflix to see films on Netflix. So at the end of the day, when you're making a film, you always have to think about what kind of film you're making. Who is the audience? And potentially who are the industry partners, be it festivals, be it financiers, be it distributors, who might be interested in this kind of film. Because not every festival is interested in every kind of film. Festivals have certain styles, certain themes that they're interested in, or certain, simply sometimes genres. Some festivals are really just about horror and fantasy films. So you have to really know what kind of film you're trying to build. If you're trying to make a Hollywood type film with a 1% of the budget of a Hollywood film, you probably have unrealistic expectations. So you have to kind of figure out what kind of film you're making. Where does that fit in terms of the spectrum of films out there, and who in the industry finds these kind of films interesting, and who are the audiences that go to see this kind of films. And of course, these audiences can be local, like Arab audiences if you're making a film in the Arab world, but they can also be international. And there's always this reality that film, because it's a very expensive art form, in the end of the day, you might be able to make a film in the Arab world in a place like Egypt, and it's such a huge country that if you do a film that's super local in its flavor, you're gonna get enough people going to see it locally to cover your costs and even make a lot of money. But if you are making a film in America, or in a small country like Palestine or Lebanon, I would say Lebanon maybe, there's a huge viewership in Lebanon, so maybe Lebanon's not as much of a problem. But if you're in a small country like Palestine, there's not a massive number of people going there to see a film. So your film has to be authentic to the local place that you are in, like Palestine or Egypt. But it has to also appeal in terms of its style, in terms of its themes, to a wider region, be it the Arab world, be it the entire universe. But you're forced to deal with these things because there's an economic reality that, in the end of the day, this is a very expensive product that is only going to be financed, whether you're paying for it out of pocket or through financing. It's only going to be financed if somebody believes someone will go pay a ticket to watch it. Now, of course, there are some funds there for very artistic films, but these are very special situations in very special countries that do have funds for these things. That's a slightly different situation. But there is this tension in film all the time, art and business, because this is the reality of this domain. So when we started out making our films, what we tried to do is we said, well, Palestine has very little, if any, financing for film. So we want to make films that have to be artistic in order to get the industry, especially festival, attention, because that's one way for films to draw attention, is by being recognized for their artistic value. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure our stories are entertaining enough so that audiences would be drawn to the film. When they're watching the film, they enjoy them. So even though we're lower budget, the audience is actually enjoying the films. That would draw interest from distributors potentially and sales agents and so on. So, and again, like I said earlier, because Palestine is a small country, we were forced, because we're low budget, we naturally fit into this kind of foreign film, art house film category in the spectrum of films. We're not going to make a Hollywood film in Palestine, especially not on a low budget, right? And at the same time, because Palestine is a small country, we had to think in terms of telling a story that is very local in its flavor and very authentic, but at the same time has global themes that would appeal to the wider Arab audience and to the wider international audience. So I would say, if I were to make an indie film today, or be it my first or second, I would really think about 3 key ingredients, just conceptual ingredients before you start working. You would need a story, and I already kind of covered that. It has to be authentic, it has to be local in its flavor, but universal in its themes. But it also has to be feasible, something that works for the kind of money and resources you have. And then you need a sort of concept, and this is a very important part. The concept is a sort of design concept, a visual concept. How would the style of the film look? Is it about, it can be the camera, it can be the color, it can be the editing. What kind of style can go with the story, that can match the story, but it can also, most importantly, allow you to turn any challenges of low budget into being strengths about the movie. And that basically means you're not going to make a movie that looks like a $50 million budget Hollywood film when you only have 100,000. But what you can do is you can make a very good film for $100,000, make it look like it's worth $250,000 if you choose a style that matches the type of story you are telling, because then the style feels a lot more purposeful and intentional, and the audience will accept it.
Do you want to give a real example of that?
And that's exactly my next step. And then, of course, there's the production plan, which I'll cover in a little bit. But basically, let's take our first film. We chose to make it in black and white. Typically, black and white would lower your post-production costs. So that's one way of kind of, deciding where to put your money. But you cannot just go shoot a film and then in the end, if you run out of money, decide to take away the colors and make it black and white. It doesn't work that way. From the minute we were actually writing the script, we knew it was going to be a black and white film because we needed the style of the storytelling itself to match that kind of film. When we were shooting the film, I was the art director, I was not just dressing the characters with whatever I thought looked good, with my eye. I actually had to take pictures and turn the pictures black and white and see how it looks in black and white before I dress the actors. So these are things that you decide from before. Here's like an example, just to give an example here. The Embrace of the Serpent is a Colombian film. It was Oscar nominated for Best Foreign Language Film, 2015. And it's shot in black and white. The concept here is it's a story of an expedition into the Amazon. And the early pictures that came from the Amazon by European expedition people were in black and white. And a lot of books documenting the Amazon from that kind of time period were in black and white. So that became the concept for the film in a way that made it, relevant for an indie film. In our second film, we were shooting in Jerusalem. And as a Palestinian production, there's nowhere on earth you're going to get a permit to shoot on the streets in Jerusalem. So our way of addressing that was to say, well, we're going to have to shoot some scenes in documentary style. That allows us to be in a small crew, that lowers our costs. It makes it feasible for us to operate without having to get a formal permit from the authority. And without also, kind of getting into any legality issues. When you're a small crew on the street, it does not matter. People leave you alone. There are tons of tourists with cameras roaming around a city like Jerusalem. Nobody really cares. So, but that does not work with any film. We had a social drama for which a documentary style works. So that's kind of also purposeful. The story matches the style we chose. Everybody has heard of the Blair Witch Project, I would imagine. That home video style film would look horrible in any other story but the Blair Witch Project, because the whole premise of the story is about this home video gone wrong to a horror story when people go out in the woods. So that's the concept, the visual concept. If it matches the story, then the audience loves it. And it does not become a sign of weakness of being a low budget, but instead actually a sign of strength, that you're choosing a style that matches the kind of story you're telling. And then there's production strategy. If you already have money, you can just rebuild everything in studio, hire everybody you need, schedule as many weeks as you need, and do it that way, right? But in reality, if you're indie, you try to find ways to optimize things, maximize the value you're getting while minimizing your cost. So sometimes you just say, I have to shoot, what we do is we think, how many other productions are happening in Palestine in that time frame? We may want to shoot in a time when there's few productions, so we have a better chance of finding actors, or not having to pay actors rates that we can't afford, because we're really operating in a very small budget, even compared to Palestinian films sometimes. And then sometimes you just have other considerations. In our case, we're based in Jerusalem, but a lot of our friends are in Bethlehem. And our friends from Bethlehem need permits to cross into Jerusalem if we want to film anything in Jerusalem. And getting a permit is not exactly easy. So for both of our films, we shot around well, actually the first film. The second film we tried, but we had to delay the production. But for the first film, we shot it around Easter, because a lot of times the Palestinian Christians from Bethlehem would get permits to cross into Jerusalem around Easter time. So that made it easier for a lot of our crew from Bethlehem to be able to join us and shoot in Jerusalem. So the whole film production was catered towards that constraint.
That's definitely a separate webinar on its own, making a film in Palestine.
But the idea is that people make this you have to have a certain production strategy and that also has to match the story. And this is what I'm trying to get at here. Just to give you an example, 52 Tuesdays was a film that was shot on 1 day a week for 52 weeks on Tuesdays. And that worked for the story. That's another way that you can cut costs. Instead of hiring a big crew for 3 weeks, maybe you just have a few friends that you can get together and shoot something once a week over a long period of time. But that does not work for any story. If we're telling a story of Rami's vacation on the beach, Rami's 1 week vacation on the beach, if you're going to shoot that over a year, then you're going to have to deal with changing seasons. But in this case, the story traces the relationship between a young woman and her mother over a period of a year as the mother goes through a sex change. So it's a very dramatically heavy story, but the timeline of the story is also a year. So it allowed the film to be shot in that way, 1 day a week for 52 weeks, and it worked, and it helped the budget constraints of an indie production. Let's see. I know I kind of answered some questions as part of my my presentation, so I don't really know how much time I have. So I can skip some things from here on. But let me skip to the next step and leave some more room for questions. I want to go back to what. Yes.
By the way, I think we're good on time, Rami. We can end up taking questions here at the end, so you're good. Don't feel like you're overly rushed.
Okay. So then let me make this point here. As part of this production strategy, you think about what things also bring value to your films when you're an indie filmmaker. For example, I'm based in San Francisco. I could totally make films in San Francisco. But the way I think about it is that my hometown, Jerusalem, is a lot less featured in film. Definitely the Palestinian narrative is a lot less featured in film. So if I make a story about, my community in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem, I'm telling a story that's a lot less frequently told and a place that the world are very well interested in. Versus San Francisco, yes, the world is very interested in San Francisco, but there's a lot more coming out of San Francisco in terms of stories and movies that, I'm competing up against bigger sharks if I'm making a film here. Versus if I make a film in Palestine, that automatically gives my film a lot of production value that is not tied necessarily to how much money went into the film, but by the mere fact of where I filmed it. And a good example here is the Lebanese film Under the Bombs. The filmmaker started filming the character looking around Beirut during the Israeli bombing of the city in 2006. And pretty much the script kind of developed from there on at a later time, but he captured that moment in time and in history where he was able to capture the bombing on camera and brought that thing to the film. There's no budget that Hollywood can bring together that can reproduce this on set. So there are tricks that people do that you can add so much value to your film and you really increase the production value of your film, even if that's not necessarily a cash amount that you're handed in from the beginning. And one thing that I want to reiterate, going back to what Yasmeen said, script. Everything starts from the script, but you have to understand that everything also depends on the script. When you're writing the script, you're not just writing your story, you're writing the story with the concept and production strategy in mind. It's okay to have a kind of a few passes where you're like free spirit, ideate as you want, be as free and unrestricted. But eventually you have to rewrite and bring the concept, the visual concept and the production strategy that you have for your film into the script itself, because everything builds on it. The script ends up in the script lining process, which gives you the shot list, the storyboards, the scene maps. This is what you're actually going to be filming. The script is also, when it's broken down, it gives you a production schedule that tells you for each character, for each actor, for each crew member, for each piece of equipment, how many days you're going to need them, on which days you're going to need them, where you're going to need them. And this basically how you create your budget. Each actor has a rate, each crew member has a rate, each equipment you have has a cost or a rental rate. And depending on how long you're going to need them, you calculate how much that's going to cost you, and that becomes your budget. And then the financial plan is how are you going to raise that money? How much of it is going to come in cash? How much of it is going to be put out of pocket? How much of it is going to be in-kind contributions? How much of it is going to be sponsorships? And so on. So at the end of the day, it all comes from the script. So as much time as you spend developing the script and making sure that the script is in line with the vision you have for the production strategy and for the vision and the visual concept vision, the better off you are when you actually start producing. Last bit that I can say here is, let's say you've made your film and you're now trying to aim for festivals. I would say always aim for the A-level festival, the top festivals you can. Festivals are always looking for premieres. So if your film premieres at a medium level festival, then none of the top level festivals are gonna even look at it. It's as simple as that. Always see when you're finishing your production, aim for the top festival that's upcoming, see what happens. But also keep in mind that festivals have different styles of film. So your film by nature might be better suited for one festival versus another, or a particular section within a festival, but not other sections and so on. And you want to go for the top level festivals because really this is where the industry goes. This is what makes them top level festivals. It's the place where you get the most exposure to the industry, people who are going to ultimately help your film get distribution, get to the audiences, right? And typically the people you would want to see your film and come on board of your project. And, there are the critics who basically see the films and write critiques about them in industry magazines. That's what would basically, kind of their opinion matters a lot for the prospects of your film. you meet publicists, you probably hire a publicist who will actually try to promote your film to the critics and to other programmers and other festivals. And you'll get a sales agent who will represent your film in selling it to distributors around the world. The world is essentially divided into various distribution territories, and your film is essentially sold one territory at a time. So the sales agent might sell to one distributor in the US, a different distributor in Mexico, and a third distributor in the Arab world. So the world is divided in these distribution terms. And for each territory, the distributor is the one who actually makes the deals with theaters, with Netflix, with Amazon, and so on, getting your film to the audiences.
That's where you need the lawyer to end up talking about the licensing for the distributions and the like. So
yeah,
really,
I get a lot of questions with people, like people asking me, when can we see your film? And a lot of times I'll say, at this point, it's out of my hand. It's actually the distributor now owns the film in the US. I cannot do anything about it. But maybe another territory, it's like Chile, maybe the distributor has not, no distributor has taken the film in that point. I might be able to do things on my own. But really, the sales agent sells the territories of the world, or the rights to your film in these territories of the world. And then it's up to these people to actually get your film out in front of the audiences. And that's why you would want to, think carefully when you're choosing your publicists and your sales agents who are coming on board, who are going to be your partners, because at the end of the day, you're going to depend on these people to actually get your film to the audiences.
absolutely fantastic. And hopefully that's a good position to be in once you're talking to publicists and strategists about where you're going to be distributing. Obviously, you've already achieved a level of success. We're going to go ahead and turn to some of the questions that we ended up receiving through the chat. And I want to start off with a question just about audience. And Rami, I know that you ended up addressing this to a certain extent about being authentic and local, but the question that comes from the audience specifically asks about making a film for Arab/Arab American audiences versus quote unquote Western audiences. How do you end up addressing those distinctions when you're making a film?
Well, I would say at the end of the day, I don't think, why do you have to have an audience for one or the other? I don't necessarily see it in these terms. At the end of the day, if you make a film that is authentic in its story, think of it this way, even with Western audiences, right? Western audiences are not interested, typically, they are not interested in telling them a story that happens in New York, you just set it in Cairo. They're not that interested in that. When they go to see a film set in Cairo, they want to see something about Egypt. They want to see something about Cairo. So if you're telling a story that is authentic to that place, you're automatically really appealing to two audiences, right? So you've got the international, not every international audience is going to go watch a film set in Cairo, but the ones who do are invested in actually seeing a story from Cairo. So you actually want to see a film from Cairo. And then basically it becomes a question of the themes you are choosing for the film. There are certain universal themes that are global and international that every audience, everyone in the world understands and connects with. And this could be simple themes like themes around justice, around love, how to live life. These are these big, broad themes. The specifics are different from country to country, but these broad themes are universal. So you can totally tell a story that is very specific to the Arab world or very specific to the Arab American community in the US, but the themes of it resonate with a much wider audience. So I really think it's not a question of this or that. I think it's a question of how to do both, because you need to do both.
Fair enough. Yasmeen, do you want to address that as well? You're on mute. There we go.
I was actually responding to Kafia's question on the chat. So you can repeat the question. I might be able to respond. What was the question?
Absolutely. And maybe, it was a two-part, and I can end up addressing the second part of the question, but specifically about how you end up addressing taboos in Arab cultures, right, that are traditional there, and looking at a Arab American audience versus a Western audience.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. So, I mean, I have limited experience, but with A Star in the Desert, I spent a lot of time thinking about whether I wanted to make the film in Arabic versus in English, and it was a really contentious conversation with the film team because everyone told me we have to make it in Arabic. It's a film in Baghdad, and we're gonna lose credibility and authenticity if we make it in English. And for me, I actually watched a number of different short films in their own language. And I actually watched a lot of films with subtitles. And it just felt to me that the story that I wanted to tell wouldn't be one really for an Arab audience. I really wanted it to be for a Western audience. I wanted the West to understand what it was like to go through a war and to be on the receiving end of war. So ultimately, I felt that making it in English with a little bit of Arabic, we have pockets of Arabic throughout, but making it primarily English was a film that could emotionally connect with a Western audience. And so I think, the people, my American friends who know very little about the Gulf War, very little about the Middle East, said that, it resonated with them. It humanized Arabs to them for the first time, where I feel like a lot of documentaries, you can kind of just disassociate from what's happening. So yeah, that was my decision. But, I think we also probably maybe didn't get the right representation from a distribution perspective as a result of that decision. But, that was my decision at the end, even though it was a very difficult one. Yeah.
Great. Rami, I want you to also address the taboo question, given the fact that the reports on Sarah and Salim, obviously dealing with a very taboo, topic on this, Palestinian man loving an Israeli woman and all of the political entanglements there.
I missed the taboo part in when you phrased the question earlier. I was talking more broadly about how to target the audiences. Honestly, when we decide on what stories to tell, we look at the community around us. We're from Jerusalem. These are first of all, for the people who have not seen the film is not just a love story. It's not a Romeo and Juliet. It is a story of an extramarital affair that becomes a political crisis. And this is inspired for something that really happened in real life to people we know. It's not based on the exact same story, but it's inspired from multiple small stories where things like this have happened around us in our community in Jerusalem. So for us, that again, is it a taboo? It's probably a taboo if you are not familiar with the community in Jerusalem. But if you're from Jerusalem, this is not, everybody knows that it's there. Or not that it's a one-off. Everybody knows that it's a pattern in Jerusalem, whether you agree with it or you do not agree with it, it is there. So the choice we made is because we felt that is a story that needed to be told about how crushing that system is, how something, whether you agree with it or you do not agree with it, it is a personal violation of marital vows that has been essentially hijacked into becoming a national crisis of everybody else's business. And that is something that the oppression in Jerusalem creates, especially for the Palestinian community. There is no such thing as privacy. And anything a small private matter, in this case, a Palestinian man's involvement with an Israeli woman, both of them married, has gotten him into a much bigger political problem. And the Israeli woman too, but definitely not in the same way or in the same seriousness. That is the kind of thing that happens in Jerusalem from one moment to the next, your entire life can turn upside down because of the political situation. That is the story where this came from. Yes, the extramarital relationships, it might be a taboo from the perspective of somebody who knows nothing about Jerusalem, even Palestinians who are from other parts of the country. But if you're a Palestinian from Jerusalem, or if you're a Palestinian from 48, where there are some everyday contact that happens between Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians, you know that this is not an uncommon story. You know that this is a thing that's there. It's really not so much of a taboo.
And I think it was more the relationship, across the Muslim man with the Jewish woman, more than just the extramarital affair. But I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is, in Jerusalem, again, it's not unusual. It is not unusual, and the tensions around it are not unusual either. But again, like when we decided to tell the story, we were not necessarily seeking the taboo or avoiding it. We were really simply, we have a number of story ideas that we're at any point in time we're developing that are all driven by either the oral history we learned from our parents or for things that we observed in the community around us. And, you develop these stories, and when these stories are developed enough, you get them in. So I don't think we were necessarily, let's just say we were not seeking taboo per se. It was simply that we felt this is a story that needed to be told, and the potential taboo perceptions did not necessarily stop us because, we had a story that we felt was important to be told, and we really cared to tell about how it's affecting our community in Jerusalem. And then that relatively, I think, small taboo dimension, the question is why abandon the whole vision for a potential taboo for some people, but not for everyone.
Understood. I want to move on to another question before we end up wrapping here. And specifically about screenwriting and scripting. And the question, is a little more academic or philosophical, but, to what extent is the hero's arc trope universal versus coming from a distinctly Western philosophy? Just in terms of, screenwriting. So, Yasmeen, if you want to address that first, and we can give, Rami an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say that in film school, the hero's journey, the hero's arc is what they teach us in, I guess, Western film school. I'm less familiar with the international world of how they think about the hero's journey, or whether they actually apply it. I agree that it could, I think that that's a philosophical conversation that's actually beyond film, to be totally honest, right? When you think about the hero's journey, and the protagonist and the antagonist, and even how dominant it is that it's male right now rather than female, and also how it's about a patriarchal aspect of someone overcoming conflict to overcoming conflict usually which requires violence, which requires some aggression, right? I can't say that I love the hero's journey as a trope that's universal. I think I do watch a lot of international films. I will say, I think a lot of them still actually adhere to the hero's journey. Try to find me a film. Maybe ask the question, I'll send it to you, which is send me a film that doesn't have this arc, because I actually spend a lot of time trying to find films that don't. And yes, there are some experiential films that very, very few, but I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, we just resonate with this formula. I don't know why we do, but it's sort of a human, the way that we perceive someone overcoming something is symbolic to us. It hits us in our heart viscerally. It becomes kind of merged in our subconscious. So, but yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot to explore there. I'm familiar with the Joseph Campbell Foundation, and I know those folks pretty well, decently well. So I think there's just a lot of controversy in general about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. But yeah, please find me a film, or find me several films that have done really well that don't follow that arc.
Rami, real quick, your take.
I would say that, the whole premise of the hero's journey is that Joseph Campbell studied mythologies across the world, and he observed certain patterns that led him to this kind of structure of the hero's journey. So I would say he definitely did not study only Western mythologies before he formulated this. Now, whether his perspective was biased by the fact that he's a Westerner, maybe. But the premise is that this is actually something that was formulated by studying multiple cultures and not just Western cultures. That being said, I'm not in favor. basically, when you're a writer, you find the framework that helps you, right? Like I never sit down and say I'm gonna sit down and write and I'm gonna like take the hero's journey and figure out my story. But what happens is that I'm writing something, and then you find yourself in a situation where something is not working. Then you choose a framework of choice and see if it helps you figure out why things are not working. And for that, the hero's journey is really good. You bring the hero's journey, you see kind of what that framework that's kind of inspired from mythology, how it's saying things work, and then you can compare with what's happening in your story. And then that might, sometimes it does not help, but sometimes you kind of see things that are glaringly, obviously missing steps in the story of your character. They're like, oh yeah, that's what's missing. And then at least you go fix it. By all means, the hero's journey is not the only framework. If you have another framework of choice that you would like to use, by all means. I think a lot of frameworks out there are based on the hero's journey, even if they're not necessarily paused as the hero's journey.
Exactly.
But again, it's one of these things where, like, I never sit down. I put I mean, at least that's my style of writing. I do not sit down and say, here's my hero's journey. Let me fit things, you know, and here's my story. I start by writing the story, and I kind of keep in mind where I'm headed. There's a certain act structure. It could be multiple acts or multiple, like certain story beats. If you're not working with an act framework, but you're working with a story beat framework, you can whatever compass you're using to direct the story, you use that. And then, these frameworks are really great for diagnostics. Like you check your story against the framework, and then you're like, it at least helps you figure out where things are working, where things are not working.
It's a good place to start. Well, I think we're at our scheduled time. This has been a fantastic conversation and an amazing start to a series. I want to thank both Rami and Yasmeen for their participation today. We're looking to expand this series and address a number of other questions. You all will have access to this recording online. We will be posting it on the AFMI website and other links as well. We want to really emphasize the fact that your ideas for future webinars are appreciated and solicited, frankly. So any ideas that you have on specific questions, right, that you want to address about potentially exploring an acting career. And I know we had a number of questions about breaking into this industry, especially during this time of a pandemic. So absolutely, we look to address those questions in the future. Specifically, I wanted to also address the issue of our Arab Film Festival and the fact that all of these festivals, unfortunately this year, due to the pandemic, have been online and virtual. We will be making an announcement shortly related to the film festival this year that will be online, related to the timing and the other films that we've selected. So look for those updates over our email channels. Obviously subscribe to our newsletter and make sure that you are well connected and informed of all the Arab Film and Media Institute events and special programming. Thank you all for coming, and we'll go ahead and close out this session.